Hello there, my name's Dan and welcome to my garden here in Essex in the southeast of the UK. So here I stand in amongst my backyard orchard, my food forest, my permaculture project, and at the back here I have some grapevines which are carrying a lovely crop. So today I thought I'd make a video showing you some steps you could take on how to grow your own grapes in your backyard or at your allotment. So be clear what you're growing your grapes for. Do you want to eat them as a dessert like a fruit, or do you wish to make wine out of them, or a combination of the two? So this here is variety Lakemont seedless, which is a US variety, and these grapes are almost honey sweet when they ripen, which is around October time here. So I can actually eat these now. Now they are a bit sharpish. I generally wouldn't recommend people eat them when they're like this. So this vine here I purchased from Ken Muir, and it's a very good vine, and I've had great success with Lakemont seedless here and in other grape growing projects. So this here is Riesling, which is a German wine grape. Very interesting, the study of grapes for wine and how it's produced, but nice little bunch here. And as I taste these, they're really interesting. The taste changes the longer it stays in your mouth, so I can see why this would make an interesting wine. This here is Muller Thurgau, which is a dessert and an eating variety, and once again quite an interesting taste. These have seeds. Now if I'm not mistaken, this is used in the making of the wine Liebfrau Milch. So grapes like a sandy, well draining, loamy soil, which is exactly what I've got here. The soil here also has quite a bit of stone in it, which helps with drainage, so that's very useful indeed. Now grapes, because they like well draining soil, generally don't tolerate heavy clay soils too well. So if you want to plant a grapevine in soil like that, you could consider building or digging quite a big hole and then filling it with something like organic matter, some horticultural grit. So things like well rotted manure, leaf mould, good quality compost from your compost bin, and then the vine can establish itself into that, better drainage, and hopefully you'll have a better chance of success. Grapes can suffer from a variety of fungal conditions such as powdery mildew, grey mould, botrytis, and what you want to try and do is keep good air circulation, so you don't want your vines overly congested with leaves or fruit. So if you've got dead, or like for example this, leaves like this, you want to get rid of those and dispose of them accordingly, because you want to allow the good air circulation to hopefully decrease your chances of getting a fungal condition on your grapes. So I'll show you something here which can help you to get sweeter grapes and also get them to ripen quicker, and you can also extend the season in this way. I'll show you. So you can see this bunch here and this bunch here, and indeed some other ones. I've removed the leaves so that the sun can hit the grapes, thus increasing the sugar content and also for earlier ripening. So removed a few. So for example, if you look at here, got a little bunch here, so I could maybe take that one off there to allow the sun to hit them. Same with this one here, that improves things a little bit more once again. Now I've also got some some bunches up here behind these leaves here. So I've actually left these leaves on, so at the moment they're stopping the sun from hitting them. So these should ripen first, followed by these here. So you're getting like a successive ripening season, if you will, and this can be a very beneficial thing to do. You don't want to remove too many leaves because of course the plant does need some for photosynthesis, but just gently remove some. This sort of thing is what you want to be aiming for. So I've got two grapevines growing here in this polytunnel. You saw this one earlier. This is Riesling, which I purchased from Victoriana Nursery, and this one here is Ria, which is a Slovakian grape, also purchased from Victoriana Nursery. So grapes fruit off of canes which grow from the previous year's growth. So this growth here that you could see, this grew this year, much of it down here as well. So next year canes will come off of this, canes will come off of this as well, and that's where the fruit will be. So it's very good. So in a polytunnel or greenhouse, of course, air circulation is generally not as good as if they were being grown outside. So what I'll be doing, or what I normally do, is have the door open. I've also got vents on either side of the polytunnel, so that's very useful to keep them open as well. If you are growing them in a greenhouse, hopefully you've got a vent at the top or a window. Keep that open, keep the air circulation going, and hopefully you'll reduce your chances of getting a fungal disease on your grapes. So you want to grow your grapes in the sunniest, warmest location that you've got in your garden, ideally south facing. This here is southeast, so it still gets plenty of sun. So I've got them up against this fence here, which gets nice and warm, and the heat radiates out onto the bunches, which is very useful. They really like that warm microclimate. If you're growing them up north, you may consider growing them in a greenhouse or a polytunnel for the extra warmth and the longer season that may provide. So you sometimes hear about this line, Pembroke and the Wash. So if you're growing grapes in a cooler part of the UK or a cooler part of the world, indeed, maybe somewhere like Canada, I know there's some people watching me here in North Dakota in the US. Do you grow grapes outside, and how do they get on? What varieties are you growing, or do you just consider you always grow them in a greenhouse or a polytunnel or a high tunnel? So let me know in the comment section below, because I'm very interested to hear that, and I'm sure many other people would be as well. So although grapes are fully hardy here in the UK, these vines here, they took down to -8 degrees C in the winter, which is about 18 degrees Fahrenheit. They took that no problem. They do need a period of dormancy in the winter brought on by colder weather. So don't heat your greenhouse or your polytunnel during the winter period if you intend to grow grapes in there. I don't heat either of my polytunnels at all. And maybe if you're up north or in a cooler part of the world, for example, maybe you do heat your polytunnel or your greenhouse for the growing of grapes. I don't know. Let me know down below if you do that. But you need to make sure that during the winter months you don't heat it. Grapevines need something in which to climb up. So the rod and spur system and also the geo system are two well-known methods. But what I do is I train it actually up the structure of the polytunnel itself. I find that very useful. So what I've got here, the vine, you can see where it's grown like this. I've actually trained it behind. I've tucked it in and it's going to go up there, and the plan is for it to grow over the polytunnel and cover quite a nice big area. Not too much, of course, because I don't want it to stop too much light getting in from my other plants. So what could be a better idea though is, other than feeding it behind, to put it in front and tie it with something like washing line, which is softer and hopefully won't damage the vine as it grows, because as it's like this could actually push up and cause some damage to the cover of the polytunnel. So just bear that one in mind. So you need to be vigilant when growing grapevines. They can grow very quickly, particularly when grown in a greenhouse or a polytunnel due to the extra heat. So for example, see this stem here or this shoot, I'm going to be attaching it to this. I might pull that through there so it's straighter, grow along there. Next year some lovely bunches of grapes hanging off of that, which will be grand. But what I wouldn't want is another stem to go very close to it, because then that could then set some fruit, and even if it didn't, or just set a little bit, the extra leaves, etc., branches, shoots, whatever, can help to hinder the airflow and thus lead to fungal conditions, which we really don't want. So don't let your vines get too congested. So when growing grapevines in a polytunnel or greenhouse, quite commonly the rootstock is planted outside of the polytunnel or greenhouse, then trained in. Now I've decided not to do that, because one reason is because I can't give the space outside of the polytunnel to this. I'm growing it in here, but also the fact that by growing it in here, it increases the warmth around the root, thus hopefully making the vine grow quicker, because I wanted to get these vines to get plenty of growth on them and then to get into cropping earlier. So that's one reason why I did that. And of course, when you're growing them in a greenhouse or a polytunnel, if you decide to use this method, you would probably be best to water it maybe twice a week. Give it a good deep watering. I don't specifically water this vine here, but it does get some water when I water these chard plants here. So with regards to grapes, they actually put down very deep roots in order to get moisture and nutrients. So once a vine is mature, it shouldn't need too much in the way of watering. But whilst a vine is young, give it some water, particularly if you're growing it in a greenhouse or a polytunnel, and definitely if you're growing one in a pot. So you don't want to overwater, particularly if the soil is poor draining, because this can actually lead to a condition called shanking. And you also don't want to underwater, because this can actually lead to powdery mildew. So you've got to get your balance right. So the majority of grapes are self-fertile, so you shouldn't have to worry about pollination partners. They should be able to produce fruit from their own pollen. This here is variety Autumn Royal, which is a Californian variety, and it's also grown commercially. So when growing this variety in a climate such as the UK, it's generally recommended it's grown in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. I'm growing it here, so some of you may remember this vine from when it was in my smaller polytunnel. So I've actually moved it to here. It gets very warm here in amongst the microclimate of the fences here which hold the heat, so I'm expecting it to do well. So I moved it during the dormant season, probably around, I think it was February time, something like that. Dug a nice big root ball around it and moved it to here. So we'll see how it does. It's put out plenty of growth, so next year some nice canes should come off of this, and then I have plenty of fruit on them, so we shall see just how this vine does. Grapevines can suffer from a variety of deficiencies such as magnesium and potassium. So you can see this here's got like a reddening of the leaves. So quite a big subject with regards to grapevine deficiency. So you might want to do a bit of research on that. But have a look at your vines, keep an eye on them. So reddening of the outer leaves is common in a vine with deficiencies. The entire leaf can also go red and leaves can fall off. So do a little bit of reading and I'm sure you'll find plenty on that. Depending on the variety of grape, deficiencies can show up in different colours as well. Grape leaves can suffer from blister mites, so you can see these here. Now, in my experience, these are actually harmless to the vine and the fruit, so I don't worry too much about it. If you only have a few leaves affected with this, you could consider removing them, but you wouldn't want to remove too many because this could be detrimental to the vine. So show you the other side. This is what blister mites, or leaves infected with blister mites, can look like. Grapevines can very easily be propagated from hardwood cuttings during the dormant season. So if I remember correctly, this is variety Muscat bleu, which is a variety from Switzerland once again, if I remember correctly, and it's a very nice grape, grows well outdoors around here. It's a seeded grape, very nice tasting, so look into that one. So you can see these cuttings are doing very well. Now the time to prune grapevines is in early winter, so late November into December. That way the vine is less likely to bleed, and this can then be a good time to take your cuttings for propagation. Now to take a hardwood grapevine cutting, what you do is you identify a piece of the previous growing season's growth. So let's say it was December now, you would cut a cane of wood away which contains 4 buds. So 1, 2, there'll be about 1 here and then another one down here. So you can identify them now, a piece of the current year's growth or the current growing season's growth. If you do it now, that way you are less likely to make a mistake when it comes to taking the actual cutting. You then get a pot of multi-purpose compost, something like that, and then you put 2 buds below the compost and leave 2 above. Keep it moist, and that should proceed to leaf out the following growing season. Grapes can suffer from pests, so I have heard of people that have had squirrels eat the grapes off of the vines. Now, I've not had that happen to any grapes I've ever grown. In fact, a few weeks ago I saw a squirrel walking around my grapevines and it left the grapes well alone. So maybe I was just lucky, or maybe the grapes weren't ripe, or they're not ripe, and maybe that's the reason why the squirrel left them alone. But if you do have a problem with squirrels eating them, you could maybe rig something up, maybe some chicken wire that stops them getting, had to be quite close knit though, that stops the squirrel getting to the bunch of grapes. Wasps, I have had that problem. So as the grapes ripen, and then particularly once they get very ripe or indeed overripe, then I've had problems in the past of wasps going to the bunches of grapes. So what you maybe could consider doing is getting some jam jars with some jam in the bottom, rigging them up, hanging them, and then hopefully that'll sort of get the wasps away from your bunches of grapes and then get them into the jam jars. That's one thing you could consider doing. Slugs, so if you have your vines trailing quite low to the ground, or they're a bit out of control and they're set fruit, and as the bunches get heavier they can end up on the ground, and then maybe slugs and snails might look into eating them. You could always maybe find a way of holding them up, maybe with some string or something like that, and not training them too close to the ground. Birds, I've never had the problem of birds eating my bunches of grapes. Once again, maybe I've just been lucky, but you know, let me know how you get on. So with regards to grapevines, I've told you some of the varieties I'm growing here, you've seen them. Boskoop Glory, if I remember correctly, is another good one. Black Hamburg has been grown in this country for a very long time. I think the grapevine at Hampton Court is that one. Look into that one. It's like a 400+ year old grapevine, which you may find interesting. And just have a look around at vines, at grapes. Try them. Don't just rush out and buy the first one that you see. Have a look around, because there's so many different varieties nowadays which will hopefully be suitable for different varieties of different regions. And there's one that you could consider growing. It's called Suffolk Red, which is a nice sized grape, and this is meant to be very hardy. So if you're living in a rather cool location, that's a US variety by the way, Suffolk Red, you could consider looking into that one. Anyway, going to stop now. There really is a lot I could talk about regarding grapes. I've made this video just to sort of a very general video, hopefully to wet your whistle, so to speak, and then of course you can look into, you can read up or watch other videos and get into grapes in more detail. So whether you're growing grapes for their ornamental value, their nutritional value, they're rich in vitamin C and antioxidants, so many health benefits, and maybe just to add a touch of the exotic to your garden or your allotment. Anyway, get into grape growing. So if you like my work, please feel free to like, share and subscribe. Loads more videos to come up, so hopefully they'll be coming up relatively soon. Enjoy whatever it is you're doing. Thanks for your time as always. See you in the next video.